Dr. Albert Einstein said, the hardest thing in the world to understand is income tax. Today, we'll give you 5 simple ways to maximize your after-tax wealth. We're going to cover an article here with you today that I felt was appropriate to go a little bit deeper into and share some of the takeaways that we had. And this comes to us from Advisor Perspectives, a financial advisor website designed to educate financial advisors.
Right.
It is titled 5 Things to Evaluate in a Tax-Managed Investment Strategy.
You know, it's funny. We read a lot of these insider industry publications, articles designed for financial advisors. And half the time we read them, we look at each other and go, this would be really good for our clients to read, or individuals that are thinking about retirement planning. This is really good for them to read as well.
I can only imagine how many frustrated financial advisors are out there that read this article and go like, I know it's important, but they won't let me talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. And
well, that's a good point.
There are a lot of advisors that come to our firm saying, I love that you guys talk about taxes, because they won't even let me talk about taxes.
Because they're getting asked about taxes, right? Yeah. They've fielded the questions. Their parents are asking them about tax managed strategies, and they go, just carry on, stick with that total return approach.
Right.
But I love this, challenging some of those norms. And this article digs into five ways to evaluate a tax-managed investment strategy.
Did you know there's an old line from financial advisors? The best way
to
not pay taxes on your investments is to die.
To die. They say that's an old line among financial advisors.
So we've been doing this for about 20 years. I've
never heard that one.
We've never said it. So
I've definitely never said it.
I've never
I would
heard
never
it.
Tell somebody that.
I get it, but I've never heard it said.
Well, I guess, where we're from, there's a lot of farm ground, and we've met with a lot of farmers over the years. And the joke there that farmers always said was farmers live poor and die rich. And I guess that's kind of similar in the sense that, hey, they bought farm ground for $500 an acre, and now it's worth $10,000.
Yeah,
and the value of that farm is very
large
on paper. They can't sell it because they'll have to pay the capital gains, so they want to leave it to the next generation and get that step up in basis, right? That's what they're referring to, is the step up in cost basis. Those heirs don't have to pay those capital gains taxes.
That type of advice doesn't help me.
It doesn't help anybody.
Well, I think it does to some, right? I mean, some, that's their goal, right? They just want to maximize wealth to the next generation. That's their only goal. That's the only thing that they're really concerned about in their financial life. I think that's a sliver of individuals that are out there today, a small fraction of individuals that are putting together a retirement plan are concerned more about their kids than themselves. I'm not one of those individuals. I'm like the majority of families we work with. I want to maximize what goes in my pocket at the end of the day, right? I want to focus on how much I can take home, because I want to create that after-tax wealth for me that I can spend so I can enjoy it today while I'm alive. I don't want to just simply do all of my tax managed strategies around who I'm going to leave those assets to.
I see what you're
whether
saying.
that's charity or my kids. Well, there's tons of great strategies out there that will help you maximize that after-tax wealth in the next generation. That doesn't help me while I'm alive.
Living. So as he says here, tax-managed strategies for the living.
Yeah. And it's because it's so darn complicated, right? I mean, this is someone that's devoted their lives to focusing on maximizing those things. And we see these types of people. We've had them on the podcast, right? David McKnight, David Walker. I mean, they've devoted their lives to maximizing after-tax wealth while they're living. And you kind of have to devote your life to it, because they're not quite as simple as they once were.
Yeah, incredibly difficult, incredibly complicated. As Albert Einstein once said, it's the hardest thing in the world to understand income tax. And geez, back in his day, I think the tax code was a lot smaller back in Einstein's day than it is today, right?
Dr. Einstein was born 1879, passed away 1955. So what do you say this? Probably around the 40s? I mean, they probably put all the tax code in a book or two back then. And it's like now you'd fill up a darn library to understand all of the tax code that's out there.
Right.
Al would probably be pulling out what Harry had left if he was still around today.
Really be yanking on it, right?
It's complex today. And so what we want to do today is just give you 5 things for you to consider and weigh when it comes to create a tax managed strategy for you while you're alive to maximize your after-tax wealth for you.
Yeah, number one here is a good point. I think this is a great takeaway. We both love this. We both highlighted this part of the article. reinforcing that tax strategies and tax managed investment strategies are not just for the wealthy.
Yeah, no, I think about this. So you could be, and this is so contrary to the way you might think about tax planning, because you go, well, they're making a lot of money. They need to really focus on tax planning.
I don't have enough money to worry about that.
It's not that big a deal for me. But if you look at it on a percentage basis or relative basis, someone that's in the upper echelons of those tax brackets, you've got a 35% bracket that goes to 37%.
Right.
What is that? Around a 7% increase, in your tax rate at that point. Well, what if you're in the 12% bracket and you make a couple missteps and you go from 12 to 22, Woo! And now you've almost doubled. You've went up about 90% in the amount of taxes that you're paying from 12 to 22. What if you go from 12 to 22 and you have some capital gains? If you're in the capital gains tax bracket of 12% or 10%, you're paying 0%. I like
Federal.
zero. Zero's good. Zero's good from a capital gains. But what if you step into the 22 and then you liquidate something that has capital gains? Now you're going from 0% to 15%. It just increased 150%. I mean, that's a big jump. I don't even know if you can't really apply a percentage to that. I mean, that is a big jump, though.
Yeah, it's a big
15x.
Well, and you think about these strategies, and a lot of times while you're still working, and you say a family has income, they're trying to reduce their taxable income while they're both working in their peak earning years. So say you're 58, 59, but all of a sudden you jump into retirement at 62, 64. Now you're in the 0% tax bracket, and this is where a lot of these strategies can really be meaningful. I mean, most of the families that we're working with are in that range where they're stepping into retirement. Now their tax brackets are as low as they've ever been for a short period of time, right? They got that window, that tax, what did David McKnight call it? The tax oasis. Before, you're 62, before you get to 72 and required minimum distributions kick in. This is when these strategies are
Slott.
Was it Ed Slott? Yeah. This is when these strategies are so meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, as I'm contemplating this, I'm thinking about the tax code, and I'm thinking about mutual funds, because there's a parallel as the article kind of goes into a mutual fund discussion here. Why do they make the tax code so complex? So you can't really see everything that's going on, right? You don't really understand how much you're actually paying in taxes until you start to dive into each and every layer of the tax code. The same thing's true with mutual funds. Why is that perspective so darn long and hard to understand? There's a lot of things that are being hidden behind the scenes in those mutual funds. One being, trading expenses, right? What is my expense ratio? Well, the disclosure expense ratio is 0.5%, and then we've audited those mutual funds and seen transaction costs drive that up to 1.5–2% per year, and they don't talk about tax costs as well. It's been estimated. I think the Wall Street Journal did an article that it added around 1.2% ish.
It was over
1% a year in tax cost inside of a mutual fund, and I think the thing is that's where the majority of this bracket's usually invested, right? Someone that's in the 12% bracket, they go, oh, well, I'm just investing in mutual funds. This is what I've always done. The people that are, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, $500,000 or more a year, those individuals that have $5, $10, $20 million saved, they're not investing in mutual funds. Right. They're doing something different. So the 47% of dollars that are out there today in taxable accounts, 47% of the funds in mutual funds are in taxable accounts.
Yes,
those dollars are probably directly down in those 10, 12, 22% brackets in the vast majority, because you don't have institutional investors investing in mutual funds. $11.2 trillion in taxable accounts.
Yeah, and just take a quick look at your 1099. If you're wondering if this is you, look at your 1099 from the last year that you filed your taxes, and you will see those capital gains get spit out from these mutual funds, right? They do all this trading, and they pass the gains on to you, and you pay the taxes on those gains. And what's Warren Buffett always say?
Yeah, never spend money on money you're not spending.
Love it.
Yeah, and that was exactly what a couple that I had met with when I read this portion of the article. It reminded me of a couple that were in their mid-80s that came in to visit, and we sat down and got to know each other. And I think they just came in to get to know me a little bit better. And then they
He's
said,
so sweet. I want to get to know him better.
Well, and that was great. And I loved getting to know him they didn't think I could help them.
Right.
Right.
They thought
just,
they were good.
Yeah, they thought they were good. They just wanted to get to know me, I guess. And it turned out, they didn't need any income, right? They said, I don't need any income. We live off for Social Security. I mean, they're living off probably less than $30,000 a year. However, when they brought in their tax return, I'm looking at their tax return going, you guys are bringing in like over $150,000 a year. Right? Why is that? Why are you paying so much in taxes? Why are you in the 22%, 24% tax bracket? And go, well, the reality is it was all because portion of it was in IRAs and required minimum distributions, but a good majority of their wealth was in taxable mutual funds, kicking out those capital gains, dividends, and interest, spending money they're not spending. Right. We set up qualified charitable distributions for them. We set up a donor advised fund to lump their charitable contributions together, generate some tax deductions so that we could relocate some of the assets that they had in those taxable mutual funds account, get them into a more tax efficient position so that we could cut their taxes in half, right? I mean, going from a 24 to a 12, you're probably cutting your taxes roughly in half. And that's why it's so important to really pay attention to that tax return and what type of investments you're holding.
And make sure that you're working with a financial advisor. If you are working with a financial advisor, make sure it's somebody that does have this tax focus. And that's kind of the point of the article. And this is a good lead in. You were talking about their investments. Sometimes we'll meet with families in that same situation. I can think of multiple couples that were in a same position and their income's pretty low, right? They've got their Social Security, but they're invested in muni bond funds, right? They're invested in bond funds that are tax-free at the federal level, maybe even the state level, but they were already in a very low tax environment. So wouldn't it make more sense to go out and get corporate bonds that are earning more than they could on the muni side? So at the end of the day, number two, is the end goal the lowest possible taxes or more after-tax wealth? Sometimes we don't want to let the tax tail wag the dog.
If you'd like to take the information that you've gleaned here to the next level, all you have to do is this. Click the link in the description and schedule a 15-minute phone consultation with an advisor on our team where you can get answers to your own unique questions and concerns. Is the end goal the lowest possible taxes or more after-tax wealth? Those can be competing priorities. And, so I'll share with you a little story about one of the things that I did, right? I moved some assets into an overfunded life insurance policy and out of my bank, right? So I had funds sitting in the bank, moved them into this overfunded life insurance policy, which turned this policy into a modified endowment contract, which they said, are you sure you want to do that? It's going to mech the policy. And what that means is now it's going to be taxed like a non-qualified annuity. So I put in $100,000 and it grows to $150,000. If I pull out my $50,000, I'm going to have to pay taxes on that 50 and pre-59 and a half, I'm going to have to pay a 10% penalty tax. I recently liquidated that policy. And while I made, let's say I made 5% a year over the last 5 years. And now I have to pay some taxes on those dollars, and I have to pay a 10% penalty tax. That 10% penalty tax means my return's 4.5%. So if I would have had that in a CD in the lowest interest rate environment in history, I would have made well less than 1%, probably. Yeah, maybe I make 0.5% a year. So I ended up paying taxes on those dollars.
Right.
And that ended up being better to pay the taxes and get a higher rate of return than leave it in even a municipal bond or a muni bond fund where I was making less and paying no taxes whatsoever. So I just give you that example so maybe apply that to your own situation and go, okay, this person or this fund has been providing me a tax-free return. However, I shouldn't just be focusing on it being tax-free. That's not where all the value is. The value is what I get to keep at the end of the day. How much am I earning and how much do I get to keep? Are you measuring the right things?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Casey, point 3 here is they talk about how assets are selected, allocated, optimized. We skipped over this a bit when we were going through the article, but it is important to understand why you have a certain investment in a certain account. You discussed tax-free bonds. I've sat down with individuals that had tax-free bonds and IRA accounts, right? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But also, if you own mutual funds that are kicking out capital gains, you want to do that in a tax-deferred vehicle. Or if you're investing in dividend strategies, you want to do those in your IRA accounts, not in your taxable accounts. So understanding which buckets and where to put certain investments is part of that optimization.
Well, I wouldn't call it careful asset allocation. Directly to your point, it should be careful asset location, right? Yes, those you should be paying attention to your asset allocation, but these are two different things. You could have the same asset allocation, but the assets, the tax efficient or inefficient assets located in the wrong accounts to optimize your tax. So optimization would be considering all of the different flavors of ETFs and different holdings that you have, but looking at the individual holdings, not just the asset classes as a whole, right? You might want to hold your real estate in a taxable account, or have your real estate just owned personally, essentially in a taxable account where you're able to benefit from that depreciation, not in, say, an IRA or a Roth IRA. And that was a lot of people there was this whole self-directed IRA push, that was really big close to 10 years ago, where we can now invest your real estate inside of your IRA. Right. And that sounds great, right? It goes, oh man, great. I don't have to pay any taxes on my growth. You also don't get to take any deductions in that IRA either.
It's very complicated.
What's the biggest benefit of owning investment real estate? The ability to take your depreciation and to generate tax deductions. You can't do that inside of a tax qualified account. So again, this is why it's so important to pay attention to that tax location.
Number 4, tax loss harvesting. I think we've seen a lot of articles this year when the markets are volatile and we're seeing the markets down and you have losses in assets inside of taxable accounts. Some advisors may push some tax loss harvesting strategies that can add value, but you also need to understand, again, don't let the tax tail wag the dog here as well. Yeah,
I mean, we've talked extensively about tax loss harvesting. I think a unique point that is made in the article, though, has to do with mutual funds, where a mutual fund can have losses that could be used to offset gains at the end of the year. However, if there aren't any gains, those losses can be carried forward into future periods, which is great if you own those things individually. But if you own the mutual fund and those losses get carried forward and then you end up selling the fund before the losses are actually used, then they don't get passed through to you. And this is the benefit of, again, looking outside of that whole mutual fund world and actually holding some individual positions, holding some ETFs, so holding some individual equity positions or individual bond positions where you have more control over your tax loss harvesting strategy and your overall tax strategy at the end of the day. Number 5.
Yeah, and number 5 here, how does a tax managed strategy fit into the overall goals? I think this is a huge piece for me.
Yeah, you have two things you're weighing there, goals and risk tolerance. And you might have thought of these things are, what are my goals for retirement? How much risk am I willing to take with my investments? You can apply this to just about every area of your retirement strategy, your long-term care strategy. How much risk am I willing to take when it comes to actually having to cover some of those long-term care expenses, right? What are my goals? Is it to make sure I'm never burdened on my children, or is it to maximize wealth in the next generation? You want to weigh all these different things no matter what the area of your retirement strategy is that you're trying to make a decision in. And when it comes to tax planning, that might be audit risk, right? There are some more advanced tax planning strategies that may put you at risk of audit. Maybe you're at risk of paying interest or penalties if you get something wrong. How much risk are you willing to take? And I think there should be another thing in there. How much work are you willing to do, or are you willing to pay someone else to do this work? Because it can take some time and some commitment to get this done. The most important thing, though, I think, is goals. What is the goal when it comes to your wealth? Is it to maximize the after-tax wealth to your children, your grandchildren? Is it to maximize your after-tax wealth to charity? Or is it to, as we've discussed here, is it to maximize the after-tax wealth that goes in your pocket day after day? Some of these can be competing goals. So it's good to make sure you take a look at all three of them. Whether you're the charity one, the family one, the individual one, whatever that is, I've never met anybody that wants to make Uncle Sam the biggest beneficiary of their life savings.